Democracy is coming to the USA. I thought I'd start with a couple of lines from a Leonard Cohen song, just because my voice is all the way down here in my most baritone register, because I'm, well, slightly hungover. I don't really usually get very hungover because I stick with one poison, and you know, I never drink to it that at much of excess, even when I go to a party, which I did last night. I went to a holiday party that Magnolia Pictures throws every year. It's probably, unless I get invited by like IndieWire, which didn't happen this year, but that's not the point. The point is every year I hit the Magnolia Pictures party, because it's the one time I will run into a lot of people I don't see throughout the year, or I don't see very much. And it seems to be the one that, you know, everybody in distribution and in exhibition and publicity, all the people around, and a bunch of filmmakers, and they go to this party. Excuse me, I'm taking a sip. By the way, I'm at home at the moment. I do this podcast as frequently as I can out of the ShowBriz Studios in the East Village, but I haven't been getting there as frequently recently. And also, even when I do, I end up doing intros at home because I don't usually know when I'm posting which segments all the time, and it's just easier to do these at home. So I'm sitting at my kitchen table in Park Slope. I am sipping my coffee. Wait a minute, I'm not. I'm going to, though. So I'm not lying to you. Hold on. I don't like the sound of slurping and swallowing on the air, to be honest with you. It's my own issue, not necessarily your issue. Okay, anyway, I digress. So I'm at the Magnolia party, and I go to it every year, and it was last night in their offices. And so it's nothing swanky. They just put out some food, and usually at, I don't know, at around 10 or 11, a stack of pizzas shows up. And if you're not in the right place, when they put them there, and believe me, people are hungry. They descend on that pizza. I'm just saying, it's like vultures on a carcass. And if you just don't get there on time, you just don't get any. I don't know why they don't order twice as much. How much could it cost to order enough pies for it? I mean, it doesn't matter. They probably could order twice as much, and they'd all go before. I mean, people just grab 2 or 3 slices and trying to mop up their livers as best as they can. I don't know. But anyway, so a lot of my friends show up at this thing. So there are a lot of alumni, like Filmwax Radio alums there. And I guess I was talking to Ira Sachs, who's been on a couple of times, which is great because, you know, I would love to get Ira on, a filmmaker I really respect. I'd like to get him on for a long conversation when he's not making a film. But he's very prolific. I know he's on to another film already, so it's like, I want to get him into the studio and do a nice long conversation. So we kind of bonded a little bit last night. It was nice. And there were other filmmakers there, or other people, certainly from the world of distribution and exhibition and film production that I saw that were on the show. A.D. Calvo, my friend, who's been on a couple of times, he was there. And many people, I just too many to mention, truthfully. Oh, and I did run into Owen Gleiberman, who is now the chief film critic at Variety. But when he did my show, it was like a month, maybe less, before the announcement that he was hired on. So I kind of cornered him too, and I said, and I think he'll come on. I mean, these people are so busy. You know, to do a podcast is kind of a headache. I know it. I know, especially if you don't have something specific that you're promoting. Like, he came on to promote his book. Now the book's out, you know. We'll get Owen back on, and he can talk a little bit more about things. He got into some hot water, right? Because he made some comments. He wrote in his column, I think, some comments about Renee Zellweger and her face, right? Because she got some work done apparently at some point around her eyes, and Owen wrote about that and saying how, you know, disappointed he was. He loved the way she looked, and he was disappointed that she went to have her. And he got a backlash against those comments, that they were body shaming and sexist and whatnot. I don't think that I completely agreed with that, or I think it came on strong. I just met a couple of weeks ago the author, John Ronson. I was at an event, and he was there, and I went up to him with a copy of his book, which is called So You've Been Publicly Shamed, and I recommend it if you've not read it to go ahead and do that. It's really good. You can listen. I would also say if you can get the audiobook in this case, because he has a great reading voice, John Ronson, Ronson. Again, the name of the book, So You've Been Publicly Shamed. And I think that Owen Gleiberman, maybe it's an exaggeration to say he was publicly shamed, but there was an element of that, I thought. I thought it was a little strong, the reaction. I think he was trying to say something, in a way, complimentary, and I think it just came out not quite so complimentary. And maybe he wasn't meant so complimentary, but I do believe there was an element of actual appreciation for the talent of Renee Zellweger in that comment. And I think it was lost by the backlash. I don't remember seeing that. I just remember seeing angry responses. And people are entitled to it, but I thought it was strong. I thought it was a little strong. I don't believe that Owen Gleiberman is a body-shaming sexist, remotely so. And that's not because I want him on the show, but that's what I believe, knowing him a little, that I do. Anyhow, so I'm sure I'm forgetting lots of you that were there last night, and I apologize. Speaking of feminism, I didn't, but I'm going to make a clumsy transition here. Another person I ran into last night is Melissa Lyde, Lyde, who works at a film distributor, but also has a film series she does. She curates at Videology, and the series is called Alfreda Cinema. And they do, I don't know how frequently, but they do screen different particular films. And I'm assuming they're in the vernacular of feminism and diversity, people of color, in terms of the films that are chosen and screened. So this one coming up on Monday, 19th of December, is Born in Flames, which is the seminal movie, probably that my guest today, Lizzie Borden, is the most known for. I remember when I was a young guy, I might have barely been out of my teens, and renting videos was all the rage. And I remember there was a movie there I could never get up the guts to rent called Working Girls. It was clearly about these call girls, and I just wanted to see it. I was a horny teenager, and, of course I wanted to see it, but I was such a square, that I could just never bring myself to bring it to the video counter, I would have been so transparent, that, I'm taking this home and just defiling myself. So I didn't see it until not that long ago when I was doing my due diligence in anticipation of a conversation with Lizzie Borden. And to show you what a mediocre interviewer I ultimately am, I never asked her the most obvious question, which is, of course, about her name. I don't think we broached it. Maybe we did. Maybe I'm not so bad. I haven't listened to this. I edited it some time ago, and I haven't listened to it in a while. We Skyped. It came out real nice, so don't worry. It came out really clear and sounds great. Lizzie Borden. She actually got Skype on her own computer just for this interview. So I want to thank Lizzie. We had a great long conversation. You're going to hear it. Lizzie was one of these underground filmmakers back in the 80s and still working in L.A. Mostly talk about Born in Flames, Working Girls. It's a couple of other films she made in that time. She was a part of the avant-garde and making very edgy films back in her youth. And she's a fascinating and lovely person. And so I would like to do is say, listen to this conversation. And then maybe if you're in Brooklyn, you have nothing to do on Monday evening, maybe go over to Videology in Williamsburg and to Alfreda's Cinema night and maybe check out this screening of Born in Flames. It requires more of you than Rogue One might, or a different part of your psyche, let's put it that way. So that's what that is about. So that was my evening before. That explains my raspy baritone and my coffee. Hold on one second before it gets cold. Okay, very good. Oh, and the lip smacking. It's the whole thing. It's the slurping, it's the swallowing, and it's the lip smacking I have a problem with. And then there's always that, that's the least offensive part of on-air eating and drinking. Well, eating, forget about it. I can't do it. There's been one or two people that asked if they can eat while they're, and I've said absolutely not. Feel free to eat. We'll start when you're done, or wait until we're finished. Please. I don't want to hear it, and most of all, you don't want to hear it. So that's that. Anyway, okay, so let's get into this conversation with Ms. Lizzie Borden, and then I'll be back afterwards to plead with you to go to our iTunes page and leave a nice comment. I by the way, Neil Cohen, who may be listening, thank you for your very nice comment on iTunes. I mentioned him by name because we were emailing, and he obviously listens to those shows, and he's heard me and my chant. Please go to iTunes, leave a star rating and a comment. Please go to iTunes, leave a star rating and a comment, or I will eat on the air.
We are interrupting this program to bring you a special message from the Women's Army.
Which would you rather see come through the door? One lion, unified, or 500 mice? All oppressed people have a right to violence.
The working class of all its name of America's mystery.
Why is it called Woman's Army?
A manifesto strong in the sentimental room, talking about a declaration. War, pain, and feathers, and all the young brave in an undercover nation. She's got a black jack, no wings of a dove. She's got a iron fist and a velvet glove. Just got a big because the red ones do. Wake up, could this be you? Could this be you?
It sounds like this is your first time you've been on a podcast.
Well, I was on a podcast with Mike White, I think.
Oh, the projection booth.
Yes, a while ago, but that was a couple of years ago.
Which film did they, it's like a major production of a podcast, right? Because they do the full Monty, as it were.
Well, mostly he concentrated on Working Girls.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, mostly it was that. And that just kind of came out of the blue. I think he didn't really focus much on Born in Flames. Mm-hmm. And I think he likes genre films more than anything. I think that's more his forte, interest, passion. And so I don't know why that kind of came out of the blue. And he's a great guy. He's really interesting. So
yeah, he's a very nice guy. I did their show, too.
You what?
I did one of their shows, too.
Oh, and what did you talk to him about?
Well, I was like a guest. They did the film Rock and Roll High School, the Alan Arkish, Roger Corman film. I was like a guest, because they interview, obviously yourself included, they'll interview the filmmakers and other people involved in the film, but they'll also have on a couple of people just discussing the film.
Oh, yeah, he talked to other people involved in Working Girls and he didn't even tell me he was talking to other people, too, and then later on I found out he did, so he's...
Do you think that was intentional, that he omitted that information, or...?
I think he did. I think it was intentional that he didn't tell me. And then I think afterwards he said, well, how did you like it? And I said, I kind of admitted, I'd never listened to it afterwards because I'd already heard what I said, and then sometimes I don't like hearing my own voice.
Oh, you have a very nice voice. But I understand it because I never liked listening to it either. But now I sort of I've listened to it so much that I've gotten used to it, of course.
Yeah, your own voice?
Yeah, I used to hate it too. But I've gotten used to it, and I guess I look at the unique aspect. It's a unique voice, so that works towards its advantage.
Well, you have to listen to your own voice because you have to edit your own material.
Correct. And,
our voices never sound alike from the inside to the outside anyway, so it's kind of it's kind of voice dysmorphia, I think. That's right. Like body dysmorphia.
Imagine singers. I think about it, that was also my singing voice.
Do you sing?
Well, I have. I used to write music and perform, and you gain a certain control over your instrument, your vocal instrument, but it doesn't mean you love the sound of it. But I got to the point where I understood how to use it,
Well, then, if you were a singer, then on some level you have to have kind of a secret kind of love of your own voice or acceptance of it. Sure. Because if you had dared to sing, that means on some level there's you're using it as an instrument of expression. So you have to accept it to a degree.
Right. No, you're right. I think that's astute.
Yeah, exactly. And you're a guy, so you have to accept the camera. I'm in the morning, I'm thinking, oh my God, do I have to, probably if you're a woman, you have to kind of deal with lighting situations. So this is the morning, so I'm like, okay, no camera. I have to, since this is my first Skype call, I have to think about in the future, oh God, how do people deal with cameras? 14-year-olds deal with Skype calls and FaceTime calls all the time, and they don't even think twice about it. So.
Well, we were raised in a where our parents, when they went out, and I mean, it was a lot. People have gotten far more casual about their appearance. Let's put it that way, over the decades and over the generations. So we still have this. We were taught to be self-conscious on some level in our upbringing, I suppose.
Yeah, but you know what? Young people now, they went from being very self-conscious to then trying to be ugly. They're like, okay, this is me. I've just woken up, and this is my unself-conscious selfie. They're trying to be as ugly as possible. I'm going, oh, do I envy them?
The hipster literally tries to master bedhead and their wardrobe, having looked like they just kind of slept in their clothes. It's very true.
Yeah, and it's very not true. I mean, it's so interesting how arranged everything is. Yeah, the first thing they do is they wake up. They probably slept in all their makeup. Actually, I knew somebody. There was a woman named Cookie Mueller who was a very famous John Waters actress and writer and all that. She used to get ready. She used to put on all this makeup at night because she had a kid, Max, who she used to walk to school, and she used to want to look really great in the mornings. So she would pile on all of this makeup and layers of mascara so she could wake up in the morning and look fantastic. So
I forget where I saw it, but there was what was the movie? Was it a movie or TV show where it was a woman who was, I guess, beginning to age, and was portrayed as being a little bit desperate for companionship, or maybe desperate's a strong word, but very intent on getting companionship. And she woke up before this man, and she ran into the bathroom to, brush her teeth and to pamper herself and to look. And then pretended to be asleep, and so when the man woke up, that kind of. But I remember a neighbor also. Her name was Rita, and her son is a very good friend of mine to this day. And we grew up down the block from her, and she was always so put together. She was just always perfect she was like a model. I mean, she looked great. And I just remember going to her door, I should say, when I was a little young teenager or something, and knocking, and she opened the door, and she, was completely unmade up, and I couldn't believe it. She looked like a person, and old, and she was older. It was amazing. And also, it wasn't just that she looked that way, but that she allowed me to see it.
Well, you were probably quite struck. I mean, she was probably very beautiful that way. And it felt probably very intimate to you as well. It was the look.
Yes, I mean, we were very close. Our families were very close, I'm sure, by that time. But still, to me, it was a shock because I had never seen her not look completely done up.
Did you have a crush on her?
No. Mrs. Robinson, you're trying to seduce me. You are, aren't you? Now we're going to talk about it. You went to art school. We're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about art.
Yeah, I did go to art school. I
was making a reference to. I was making a reference to The Graduate still, because. But it works perfectly because he. But I can ask you about going to art school since you did go. Where did you go to art school and when?
Well, actually, I went to Wellesley, which I did not want to go to. My parents, I grew up in Michigan. My parents were actually from New York, but my father got a job at Wayne State University in Michigan. But I wanted to go to NYU more than anything, but they were afraid of me going to New York and being at NYU. But I did not fit in at Wellesley at all. I kept hitchhiking to New York. I wanted to be, and I studied art history, but because there was really no painting department at Wellesley. So I kind of took over a basement in one of the buildings and was kind of creating my own art major. But what happened was that one of my teachers at at Wellesley turned me on to Art Forum magazine. So I started writing for Art Forum while I was in school, and it was amazing because I met all these famous artists.
Wow.
Really famous artists, and I had such agency at that point at a really young age. So the problem with knowing so much about art history is that I really couldn't be a painter because there was a kind of voice behind me saying, so-and-so already did this, so-and-so already did that.
Right.
And I think that's what sort of drove me into filmmaking, because I didn't go to film school. And I also had seen a retrospective of Godard films, and because I was writing essays, essentially art criticism, and I really wanted to be a visual artist to kind of put it together. You could do essay and you could do visual stuff, and it kind of exploded. And at the same time, feminism was exploding for me at a time where I saw that there were very few women. There were women in the art world, but in some ways they were treated as second-class citizens.
Right. Yeah, you look at a lot of those painters coming out of that period, or the generation before, it was very masculine.
Well, it was, and the performance artists of the time, Hannah Wilke and Joan Jonas, I'm not really quite sure what generation you could call them. They were not well respected. They were seen as kind of, they were regarded sexually. I mean, because a lot of them used their bodies as their artwork, and that wasn't really considered serious. You know, if you look at, for example, somebody who later on in another generation was respected, Cindy Sherman, that was much later. That was much, much later. So I sort of started not to fit in and started to reject the art world at a certain point. And but it was some of the artists who I realize now influenced me, and it was artists like Vito Acconci, who I was actually going out with for a period of time, who was making he was making films with Super 8, which I would never do, because they were like making films with little tiny little pieces and working with tweezers. There was another artist who I was kind of seeing, Richard Serra, at the same time, which he treated me like a little assistant, like go do this, go do that. I had been writing about his work and actually did a huge interview with him that a few years ago was included in a catalog for his big Met show like 3 years ago. I completely forgot that I had done that interview, and completely forgot. And to this day, now I don't even know what I was talking about with him, because that's a learned language, that kind of art historical language. I don't even know what questions meant, but he had come back from Germany with a film with his wife, Clara Wiregraff. He wasn't married to her at the time, I don't think. But Didi Halleck, who I just saw recently, was cutting the picture, and he just gave me all these tracks to create a soundtrack. And I didn't even know how to edit. So there it was. I was becoming a filmmaker. So that was before I started to make my own films. But it was part of this whole context of New York downtown, the art world, film, all of this was this maelstrom of activity, but it was still within the context of a very, what I call now, patriarchal culture. And there was a lot of pushback by women to a degree. There were meetings where women were talking about being in galleries and representation in galleries. But what I was starting to notice, being of a younger generation, was, where are all the Black women? Where are all the non-heterosexual women? And at that point, I was heterosexual. But I was questioning my sexuality, which has been quite fluid over the years. I mean, at that point, I was starting to experiment with sleeping with women. At this point, I've been with a man for many years, and it's been kind of confusing to many people, like, well, what are you? So the seeds of experimentation kind of got sown there. And when I started to make films, after learning how to edit, because editing is like writing. I thought, okay, I have to make films where I use the process of creating films as a way to expand what I know. And I don't want to go to film school because I realized that art, the creation of art, was destroyed by going to a school like Wellesley and learning about art history. Because art history, it actually ruined art for me for a while. And I actually dropped out of the art world to such a degree that I'm only just in the last few years starting to want to go to galleries again. Because when I was sort of studying art history, the whole Clement Greenberg like aesthetic was so imposed, and I think that's why a lot of the artists who I was writing about were not those kinds of artists. They were performance artists, and dance performers. Yvonne Rainer, Simone Forti, Trisha Brown. Maybe that's why they hired me, actually. Although there were a lot of other people, Mel Bachner. There were a lot of artists as well as performance artists. But I was sort of really guided over into the whole experimental arena.
Right, which was less imposing the conventional art school curriculum and film school curriculum imposed these existing patriarchal kind of contexts to art making. And you wanted to break from that, so you just sort of went your own way.
My own way of finishing Wellesley and getting out of there. I mean, everybody at Wellesley, I was Jewish, although I don't identify. Jewish for me, Jewish for my parents was Israel has a right to exist. That was it. There was no other thing. There was no bar mitzvah. There was no nothing. It was
same here. Same here. Grew up in the same type of family.
Yeah. But everybody at Wellesley I felt was Muffy, Buffy. I mean, they were all like Dean Acheson's kids and whatever. I had no relationship with anybody there at all. So, I have no feeling for it. And
were you dating though, like the students at Wellesley? That's in Connecticut.
That's in outside, a few miles outside of Boston.
It's Cambridge, right?
Yeah.
So was there any kind of? There's so many colleges up there.
Oh, there's so many. And for a while, my brother was going to Harvard, and we shared an apartment there.
Oh.
And I met Carl Andre, and I was sitting at Max's Kansas City with, Robert Smithson before he died. And it was just, I was thrown into the midst of it. But on the other hand, I was also meeting these punk rocker types. And it was it was an extraordinary time in New York. It's a New York that doesn't exist anymore. But and I was also meeting people from the Wooster Group and other performance theaters. And so what happened was kind of an explosion. And yet I was not even part of those theater groups because what I wanted to do was more political than that. And I was influenced by movies like The Battle of Algiers, because I felt like I had to do something agitprop. But that also came out of, there were also groups like Art Language that, Catherine Bigelow and some friends who I'd met through the Whitney program were involved in. So that all sort of came together as a reason to create Born in Flames, which took 5 years, because for me that was like an exploration of what if you brought in women who one would never see. I sort of you had to sort of...
Not only lesbians and African-American women, but African-American lesbian women.
Right, exactly. Because everything was so homogenized. It really, everything, a kind of work grew out of that culture, but the subject was... The positing of a subject came out of a kind of art language questioning and reading Marx and Lenin and all of that. But then seeing that all that seemed so hypothetical that it just seemed like language, but then to actually imagine it was something which I knew I couldn't write because I didn't know it. And the idea that there were many languages, but those languages had to be manifest in people who I didn't know, and nobody in that culture knew. Not a single person knew anybody. So it was how do I bring in people? How do I create a multiplicity of languages? And so the interesting thing for me right now is not about, oh, I made this film years ago and now I want to talk about it. It's the fact that having done that and created something which has a multiplicity of languages, it's the weird irony of creating like a social democratic cultural revolution that now social democracy is kind of in the news, and that someone who is actively running for president is now talking about social democracy, where that would have been anathema at any other time. I mean, the idea that he's actually being listened to. That's kind of bizarre.
But he's also running against a woman.
Exactly. And the woman, who to me is like, oh my God, this is such an extraordinary thing, is being seen as old guard. That her ideas, I'm actually very pro-Hillary, but people are considering her with great suspicion, and that feminism, which at the point where, one of the reasons why I wanted a multiplicity of voices at that point was feminism was a dirty word in many corners. I myself, at that point, was very suspicious of all the Ms. Magazine stuff because I couldn't relate to Gloria Steinem at that point. I mean, she dressed too well. She wore clothes which
fashion forward. Yeah. She created fashion. I mean, she created a style. It's true.
Well, yeah, they seem to be so ladylike. Not Flo Kennedy, who was in Born in Flames. She was a rebel, and I don't even remember how we found her, or how she worked with us in Born in Flames. She was our heroine, and we never knew what she was going to say. She was amazing.
She was also in a documentary about the women, who were disrupting the presidential conventions in whatever, it must have been the 70s. Do you know what I'm talking about? I have to find the name of that. Flo Kennedy. She was great. She was a real disruptor of part of this group. They did a lot of very, very funny disruptions. They would wear costumes and just, do you know what I'm talking about?
Oh, I know exactly who you're talking about. In fact, a little piece of it was used in She's Beautiful When She's Angry, a documentary that came out a couple of just last year. They showed a clip from that group that you're talking about, which was amazing. But she was unafraid. She just went right in, and Gloria Steinem traveled, and we're talking about the same thing. So various groups of women use different language to talk about the same thing. Why does a word like feminism have to divide everybody? Just let's include everyone, include all the different languages, and run them at the same time. But let's also run like music, so you don't have to listen to boring speeches, but bring people together who would seem to clash, but who are sort of going for the same kinds of things. Like, of course, we all want the same amount of money as men get. Of course, we want childcare. Of course, we want, if we have children, and some of them didn't, of course, some of the aims were exactly the same. But I look at it now and I say, okay, well, look at these really young women who say, feminism, that's like ridiculous. We don't need it. And they actually are very entitled in ways they don't know because of some of the battles that early feminists fought. They see Hillary with a great deal of suspicion because she seems so old guard, and Bernie, of course, I mean, he's amazing. But, they're anarchists, and they, in some ways, Born in Flames was very anarchistic. And I understand why some of these young people really, I just came from introducing several screenings, and I would ask audiences, they're all Bernie fans. And I'm thinking, well, I really am sort of embarrassed to say I want a female president. But in a way, it's sort of come full circle where it's not that important for them to have a female president. And I'm going, whoa, this is insane. This is America. Almost every other country, even the most backward countries in the world, where they stone women to death, some of them have female presidents. What is wrong with this country that we can't even have a female president? It's an interesting dichotomy, and so to me, when I see this, it's not about, this film isn't even about me. This film, in some ways, is interesting to me just because it holds a mirror up to a culture where so much hasn't changed in 30 years. And I wonder, it makes me profoundly sad that some of it has not only not changed but gone backward, like choice. You know, I thought it was bad then, but it's worse now.
Yeah.
You know, those kinds of issues.
As a matter of fact, there's a brand new documentary that opened this week called Trapped by Dawn Porter, filmmaker, African-American documentary filmmaker. And it's about these laws that were passed in states like Texas and a few other southern states, specifically where they're created to make it almost impossible for the clinics to practice. You know, it's just, there's so many loopholes and so, you know, for them, and so a lot of them are closing down as a result. So these assholes find any way to do this. It's very depressing.
It is very depressing. It is. It's so. You know, one of the reasons that I said this, the film in 10 years after a social democratic cultural revolution, is that I had been reading a lot of Marx and Lenin and all of that, and there was the woman question. So it felt like, wait a second, even after what seems to be an improvement to a normal, like, liberal democracy, which may not be, if God help us, Trump wins, there would still be a woman question. There would still be inequality in pay. There would still be some of the same problems going on. So I wanted to take it to an extreme because we've had Democratic presidents. Look what happened with, okay, Obama got beaten to a pulp on stupid issues, but will the woman question never go away? And the ignorance never go away? I mean, what you're talking about is so valid. I mean, especially the stupidity, though. It's certain Southern law men, I mean, whether they're senators or other publicly elected figures, don't understand even what an abortion is, how it's performed. They don't even understand what happens to a woman when she's raped. I mean, things like that. They don't understand what a rape kit is. You know, there's just how is it that a man gets to be to that age and not understand? You know, female sexuality, rape, all of these issues are. How can that be?
Yeah, well, it also feels like it's just punitive because everyone knows that, legal or illegal, women will continue always to have abortions, and so. Really, what's the point of making it harder for poor people? It's just very blatant to me, you know, that it feels very classist and racist, very, very, very bluntly, you know. And maybe even further than that, perhaps it's just a basic misogyny because women will continue to have abortions, but they'll just get, you know, it'll be more dangerous.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, one of the projects that I have been trying to do for a really long time has to do with an abortionist, and it's just been really difficult to set up. It's been almost impossible to set up, but if you look at the portrayal of abortion in cinema, what is seen as radical in movies are films like The Obvious Child or Grandma, which to me, I'm glad they're made, but they seem so basic to me. You know, a girl has an abortion. Yeah, okay. Well, that's better than how usually it's portrayed in television or movies, which is a woman has a miscarriage. That's kind of how they do it. Oh, the woman has a miscarriage because, of course, she would never have an abortion. But the idea about the abortionists is like, wow, it's tough, it's edgy, but it's really impossible to get financing because what happens is that companies that would give you money have ancillary projects, have ancillary companies, have ancillary anything. So unless you do it the way that I did Born in Flames or something, which is do it yourself, do it for $200,000, you can't really do it in any other modern way because any right to lifer can destroy a whole day with a weed blower. You know, you'd have to really do it underground. It's really hard.
I was just going to say, but after Born in Flames, you were now a filmmaker. So how did things change then? I mean, now that you were perceived by yourself as well as others as a filmmaker, how did you move forward from that?
Well, did Working Girls, which kind of came out of Born in Flames. And then I did a film that put me in movie jail at Love Crimes, which was awful. It was actually not my film. It was a script by Alan Moyle, which was then horribly distorted. Alan Moyle is who did Pump Up the Volume.
Yes.
He's a really fascinating man. Very, very perverse.
Is he?
Funny perverse. He had a great script. Sean Young didn't read the script until the day of shooting and then decided it was crazy and twisted. But then I had two companies who didn't agree on what it should be, and I got conflicting notes all the way through. Sean didn't want to make it. And I was such an innocent that I just thought, it'll turn out in the end, but I got really conflicting notes and didn't know which ones to take. And I should have either walked off it, I should have done a lot of things. And then at the end of the day, Harvey Weinstein convinced me I had to keep my name on it. And then they hired Kit Carson, who has since died, to add elements and flashbacks to it that I didn't agree with. And I should have taken my name off it because it really isn't my script. It really isn't in so many ways my work. And that put me in movie jail. Now, movie jail is one thing, but and then after that, I did something called Erotique, which was a kind of an omnibus thing where, again, it was a situation with somebody recutting. Bryan Cranston is in this thing, which early Bryan Cranston, pre-Breaking Bad. But again, it was something where, because I had complete freedom in doing 2 independent films where I could edit until they were ready. And I wasn't used to handing over material to someone who would recut stuff, put music in it. From when you have experience like that from movie jail, you end up going to movie prison. And then it becomes really difficult to make anything. I had a couple of little minor TV things. Actually a really good experience with Zalman King because all he cared about, and I wrote something. It was really meaningless in terms of content, but it was not a bad experience. But then the idea of working and doing just either erotic thrillers or really low-level television, directing that was not interesting to me. And that's when I started trying to get a film called Rialto off the ground, which was about a woman running a movie theater where she shows foreign films and gets in trouble with the Catholic Church because she's showing movies like Miracle Milan and other films that the Catholic Church find and the MPA find objectionable. And this was set in 1953. Susan Sarandon was attached at one point. But the woman who is running it is actually is running a secret abortion clinic in the basement. Well, I've been trying to set that up for a long time, but it's been difficult. And actually, my partners and I we were going to meet with Susan for 3 days of final script conversations on 9/11, the day that the planes hit the buildings. We were on the last plane that landed and saw everything go down. But from that moment, the conversation in America was all about freedom fries, and there was not the atmosphere for that kind of movie. And the movie wasn't about abortion per se. It was about when one freedom goes, they all go. The freedom to show what kind of movie you want to show. It was because for me they're all related. The freedom over your own body, the freedom to show what kind of movies. It was not a cinema paradiso. It wasn't that kind of movie, but it was kind of a love story. A kid comes back from the Korean War, where there too, it's really about, it's kind of about communism, but about the Red Scare, but not about the Hollywood 10. So it was very complex, but that was not the atmosphere in which to make the film. But I've not abandoned the film.
For you, the listeners of Filmwax Radio, Casper is offering $50 towards any mattress purchase at Casper.com. I myself have been sleeping terribly these last few weeks. I mean terribly, and I can't wait to get my own mattress, which I'm ordering from Casper.com the moment I finish this episode of the podcast. To receive $50 towards any mattress purchase, go to CasperTrial.com/FilmwaxRadio. Again, That's CasperTrial.com/FilmwaxRadio for $50 towards any mattress purchase.
Hello, my name is Jason Schwartzman. You're listening to Filmwax Radio. I'm having a great time.
To me, I think I have to make something that means something, because after having been in movie prison, you just kind of can't come out and make an erotic thriller. It's just not.
Yeah. In prison, they take away your autonomy. I mean, that's really what it's about. Is that what you're basically saying when you're in movie prison, your ability to make films autonomously is taken away?
Yes, it's the ability to make anything. It means you're colder than cold. You're frozen, completely frozen. It's that, you're just not considered in any list because you're colder than cold. Meaning that I write a lot. I write every day. I write. And of course I go out and I pitch pilots, and sometimes I get a little money to write a pilot, but it doesn't happen potentially. A lot of them are sort of political. Some are sort of edgy. I've written a film about Bob Marley, which almost happened, but we didn't get the major music rights. So we've had to, that's not for me to direct. I mean, that's kind of a money job, but we couldn't get the major music rights. And so we have had to change the story 180 degrees so that it won't matter. And it's actually a much more truthful telling about the Bob Marley story, because the Bob Marley story the estate wants to tell is the light side of Bob Marley, and there's a much, much darker side of him. So, that to me is work. It's not what I consider my voice is, which is much more Born in Flames or Working Girls, which is, for me, that's about women on the edge. It's about women who are disenfranchised. That's why choice is a valid subject for me, or trafficking, or women's sexual rights, or things that are forbidden subjects. And so, of course, you can't get money. Of course, you can't get money for those from any kind of real place. One of the things that has sort of troubled me has been this whole issue of diversity in the Academy Awards, because I just consider it to be too narrow. There are amazing films about, by women all over the world, but we just don't get to see them because the distribution systems in America just don't exist. And amazing films by women have been shown in film festivals everywhere, but they're small. Yeah. It's that they don't get into the funnel where Academy members get to see them or vote on them, and they're so interesting. And it's just that we're just so focused on the narrow system that channels those particular films to vote on here. And usually by next year, we've completely forgotten who won anyway, so it doesn't really matter that much. But I wish that I could see more of those films, but they're just not even on Netflix. If you're searching late at night for, okay, what am I going to see next? Of course I'm going to watch all of House of Cards.
It was doing the same thing. I had to turn off my brain for a little while earlier, and I was watching House of Cards. Isn't it interesting, as you're speaking, I'm thinking like how, in a smaller level, on a micro level, it's a very depressing situation. Yet when you look at the bigger picture, so here we are with all these backwards legislation going on and states making mostly pretty bad decisions. But then you look at how Bernie Sanders can be a viable candidate, a socialist Jew and a woman. And there's a clown or two also. But it just sort of seems like, on a national level, we're really putting this person up there as a potential president of the United States. It's just such a contrast, A
contrast to, you mean to or to other countries, or what?
No, I'm just thinking about even just our own country. It seems like there's such a contrast between, on a very sort of micro level and a macro level, what our priorities seem to be,
Yeah, the scary thing is that Donald Trump seems so familiar to us from reality television, that it seems to be what people are so used to. I mean, But the sad thing is that nobody has started to attack Bernie Sanders on his Jewishness yet. That hasn't come up. That I think they're waiting to like jump on that. Donald Trump is what, German? I mean, that, you know, this dominant kind of acceptable maybe religion. I mean, that's kind of bizarre. It's kind of a fascinating reality show that's going on. I think that's why people are riveted to it, you know. But what's so frightening is when you look at Angela Merkel. Is that how you pronounce her name? Angela Merkel, or other leaders of other countries, and you see the kind of seriousness of it, and then you see this extraordinary kind of romp of this, you know, it becomes kind of, I mean, it is profoundly entertaining, but it's
there's too much in the balance. That's the problem.
Yeah, it is too much in the balance. But you know, the other thing though is that the checkmates that exist right now in Congress. I mean, that's the tip off always with Trump. He's like, oh, I can get Congress to do this. Oh, I can get Congress to do that. And like, oh no, you won't. I mean, that's insane. I mean, but when you think of the people and what they believe, it's just like a snow job. You know, they think it's like his television show that he's running it like, and it's kind of brilliant. But then you consider all of the attack ads bought by one party against the other party. They're buying attack ads on each side, and there's just all this money flying around to kind of. It feels like Game of Thrones or something like that. Everything is kind of like everything is kind of like has a television reference inside a television reference.
Right.
So it's kind of a game played on television that has nothing to do with what's going to happen in the real political world. You know, I can imagine Donald Trump, once he has to get away from all the cameras, he's going to be so bored if he ever got it. He'd be like, oh my God, I have to do this now.
Right.
So do I dare ask you if you're a Bernie or a Hillary supporter?
I'm right down the middle right now, I have to tell you. You see, here's my thing, Lizzie. At some point in my younger years, I just decided to vote platform. So I'm not very good in primaries because, you know what I mean? Because I want my party in office. Because I basically believe a lot more in their platform, and I believe a lot less in the other guy's platform. And there's certain basic fundamental issues that the Democrats have mostly gotten behind, which I, fundamentally agree with. So when I go in the voting booth, I kind of tick down in a column, and it really doesn't matter to me at the end who the candidate is. Part of that, there's a small cynical kind of aspect to it because I just feel like at some level I realize it doesn't matter. It's just a party that matters, and maybe there's less damage when my party gets in, But, on a certain level, I'm really split in this particular one. I had no problem saying I was for Obama at all, but when Hillary was running against Barack. But this time around, I'm really much more split.
Well, I agree with you. I happen to think Hillary would be better at the mechanics of getting certain things done because I love Bernie's ideas, but how is he going to give everyone a free education? I mean, I just don't see that happening, although it would be a great idea.
And it would be great to watch him try. Come on.
Yeah, that would be great.
And it would be in the forefront of the conversation, which is almost as important because, let's face it, we go through this country, of knuckle draggers. We need a decade of talking about something and pushing and keeps coming up in the national conversation like marriage equality. And then, oh, yeah, I guess it's not that big a deal. It's just like... when your kids are starting to say, God almighty, let's face it, your brother is gay. Anyway, Dad, why are you...
Yeah, exactly.
Your priest is gay. Why are you so against this? And so I think it was interesting to keep having these conversations regardless.
No, I think you're right. I mean, maybe he has to be there and bug everyone and get shot down because what would it hurt? What would it hurt to introduce these ideas now in this lifetime so that kids grow up thinking it's possible? If kids grow up thinking it's too late for those people saddled with this debt, but maybe there's a way to somehow forgive some of the debt and start to at least introduce some of the school systems, California and New York. I mean, somehow there might be a way to introduce the seed of the idea. At least somebody, you know, like when he said, you know, I'm operating outside the roadmap, you know, in that famous interview with, I think it was Chris Matthews. I think it was with Chris Matthews. Did you see that interview?
No.
Where he said, I'm outside your roadmap. And it was like, whoa, this is so interesting. It was totally anarchistic. It was great. So maybe you're right. Maybe we have to go with the dreamer. You know, I mean, that could be great as long as I'm like you. It's like everything Democrat. Sometimes in West Hollywood, which is a totally blue state. I mean, but that's another thing about this country. I mean, look, I'm happy to be in this country and not another country. Although I must say that whenever I meet a Canadian, I always like Canadians, and there's got to be a reason why. They're just kind of kinder people. But is it, you know, I see certain movies like Tangerine. Did you see Tangerine?
Oh yes, and in fact, the filmmaker was on this podcast, and one of the actors.
I loved it. I live in West Hollywood, where that movie was shot was maybe 5 minutes away by car from where I live, and
you don't have to say by car. It's obviously it's L.A. Go ahead. What are you going to walk? They did, I guess, but go ahead.
Yeah. It's really close, but I live in a little blue area. Everyone around me is gay. I mean, the huge guys, 200-pound guys, walk little tiny dogs. And I said, why do you have such a little tiny dog that you're walking? He says, hi, honey, I'm not walking my dog. I'm cruising, because it takes like an hour to walk around a block, you know. So, but where he shot his film, yes, those Mia and the other beautiful woman were gorgeous, but Hollywood is actually a little pocket of red next to West Hollywood, which is a pocket of blue, because every 6 months there is a bashing or a killing of a transgender person. It's not that friendly. It's like Idaho. There's little pockets of Idaho in Hollywood.
Yes, I noticed that. Yeah.
That rage is there. And, you know, a big motivator for so much is rage, you know, anger at conditions that don't go away. Because a half an hour away from West Hollywood is South Central and Watts, where there's not a single, maybe one grocery store. You know, it's really difficult to get food. I mean, there is so much poverty, it's so much hunger in America, you know, and people send their money to, you know, there's like a tsunami somewhere and they send their money away.
Well, now you're taking Donald Trump's perspective. That's his whole stand, is like, stop sending money. But you're not saying to stop sending the money. I understand. That's the difference. Is like there's problems right in our own backyard that are pretty enormous.
Yeah, no, I'm saying that. No, I had just been talking to a sort of goddaughter of mine the other day about maybe we should go every week to a soup kitchen here. That would be a good thing for her, just because she leads a very privileged life. But a few years ago, I mean, look, my life is filled with projects that I started and then didn't complete. There's a woman named Sweet Alice Harris in Watts who has shelters for the mentally ill women, and it's in Watts. Watts is a half an hour by car from West Hollywood, and it's poor. It's not only poor; there were at that point, which is around 2003, or 2006, no grocery stores except for the expected ones. I mean, nowhere to get anything healthy. And right. It's not that people should stop sending money to other countries to help people out, or going to Greece or going anywhere else, but how do you help with that? You know, and how do you become aware of that? I mean, how do you, but somehow that ties into this American election too. You know, how do you get people who are poor in America to come out and vote, and how do you get their elected officials to work to get them to vote in order to get the right people to somehow help them? You know, it's like so few people vote here. You know, and because they're apathetic, because they don't think it's going to make any change. So the percentage of non-voters in this country is kind of epidemic.
Did you see the last Democratic?
Yeah.
I think it was in Flint.
Yeah, it was, but...
Yeah, and they were, people came to the microphone, and there was one woman who said that her daughter, I think was, or one of her children had been hospitalized because of the contamination and this and that, and also, just really describing really, really horrible circumstances. And, he really responded, Bernie. She was touched by his connecting with her.
Well, but there is also too a kind of seeing all black people as poor and disenfranchised when there's such a huge black middle class, so. But anyway.
There's also a middle class values that many even impoverished black people have, which is also not talked about. I do believe many of the Republican leaders have described poor black people.
It's just that the reason I think for that is just that big roundabout, because you had asked on the phone the other day about just talking about an old thing and it not being old. And the reason for me and why I'm fascinated by the resurgence of this film and this moment and what buttons it's pushing. So I'm always asking people why they're interested in Born in Flames at this very moment. Also, these weird sort of synchronicities like blowing up the World Trade Center. Why that? The death of a woman in prison, being called a suicide. I think that post-Occupy Wall Street, this film has just started to be shown. And what was interesting is that I had shown it a couple of years ago in one of those reclaimed gardens on the Lower East Side, when in my day they were just burned out buildings in between buildings where it was really, really dangerous to go to, and now they're reclaimed gardens. And so it was shown outside in one of those spaces, and there was a woman there from Pirate Radio who had seen the film from years before. It was just shown on a screen outside. It was a very, very warm night. And then there's this band of boys who are on bicycles, and they saw it. They must have been their early 20s. They had no interest in meeting me, none whatsoever, because this woman's like, do you want to meet the director? No, not interested in meeting the director. They were riding their bike to go see the film somewhere else. They wanted to see the film. They didn't care that I made it. They didn't care who made it. They were boys. They weren't women. So I was thinking that's really interesting. Something about it is they're really connecting with some radical element of just call to action, some kind of agitprop feeling about it. And therefore it's disconnected from me. It almost feels like, well, you're not old enough for this, but imagine your children having children one day, which I'm sure you hope, and you're obsolete. I almost feel like I'm obsolete in relation to this. It's kind of gone on and has a life of its own.
Right. No, I understand. You like a child, you let it go. I understand.
Well, you're not ready to let yours go. You have to babysit them.
Yeah, no, nowhere near it. In fact, my circumstances are I have a boy, and his mother and I split up after a couple of years after he was born. She had another child, so he has a younger sister. And the other day, I think when we were talking, I guess neither parent were reachable by the school, so I got the call, and I was just home, and I went out to her school and picked her up. I'm not trying to, make myself like a saint, but I said it to her. I feel like, so close to her because my son lives and, has lived with her for the last 6 years. So I treat her and feel like she's my own child. I don't expect her to feel like I'm her father. She has a father, but, I can't, it's just the way I guess the way I feel. So sometimes I kind of do feel like I have two kids.
But that's great, actually.
Yeah. Sure.
I actually think that that's the modern way of doing it.
It seems to be, right?
Yeah. Look, I never had children of my own because I grew up with a depressive mother, and I have days where I kind of want to just not have the day. I just want to say, okay, this day does not exist, and I just didn't want to be that kind of mother.
Yeah.
but I do love children. But I also know I've also seen a lot of situations where parents love their kids but don't like their kids. So I'd rather just choose the ones I love and spend a lot of time with them. But the great thing is you get to give them back. Say, okay, that's enough now. So, but I really think kids are. I have learned so much from them. But it sounds like, I don't know, that you have fun with them when you're with them, right?
Yeah, I mean, sure. Sometimes they play on their own. I mean, it's not like I'm looming over them much of the time. You know, kids, they go to their room and they kind of keep busy. But yes, I do, and I enjoy being with them. And this morning I woke up. She was crying because I guess the babysitter last night had braided her hair, and she started taking out a couple of braids, and I think she just freaked out because I don't know. I couldn't quite understand. She thought her friends were going to tease her about the braids. And she started taking them out, and then, it caused the beginning of a whole thing. She realized, she realized that she just created a situation. So I immediately had to call her mother, who was going off to a set to shoot something, and, had to figure out how to deal with this problem. I don't, I'm not as familiar. I don't have an African-American daughter that I've had years of dealing with that. I have my son has very short hair and very easy to deal with. So it was this new crisis that fortunately it all worked out. But
oh, did she get her hair unbraided?
Yeah, she did. I mean,
oh, thank God. I mean, those serious issues. No, seriously, that
I know.
African American hair is like a serious issue. It's
Oh, I couldn't believe it when I met my girl who became my girlfriend. This is 17 years ago. I just had no idea. I think I had dated maybe one other black woman, but it hadn't gotten serious or anything. It didn't last very long. And so when I met this woman who I ultimately married, I just couldn't believe that. I just was so unaware of it. It wasn't part of my experience, as a New York Jewish guy in a small family. You go get your hair done like every week. That seemed almost insane. I have to get it blown out. I have to get it, I just couldn't, I didn't know anything about this. Although I did work in music business, and I, was in advertising, and I was introduced to lots of these hair magazines. So I guess on some level I was aware that there was a hair culture, which was also new information to me.
Well, no, it's interesting how this year, having seen Tangerine and having seen Transparent, it suddenly gave me a feeling that I'd been in the wrong place for a long time, because New York, when I was there, was just a kind of such an exciting time. It was downtown when it felt like the Wild West. There, even though I was working in a slightly different tangent because it was political, it involved a lot of like alternative women. There was still there were punk musicians, there was Beth and Scott B doing their thing, there was like Max's Kansas City, there was all of that, but everybody was there was interactions. I was working with non-actors mostly, but I was working with musicians, I was working with theater people from the Worcester group and all that, and there were people where you could, like a guy named Rafiq, where you could just get like short ends of film stock. There was a guy named Marvin Soloway who had a lab where he would just develop stuff for free in exchange for whatever, and it was you could just go out and use the city as your set, which is why I used the World Trade Center. You could just walk up to the top and put your little Play-Doh there and pretend it was a bomb. Everything was so funky. Everything was graffitied, everything, and rents were low. I mean, I had a loft for $400 a month on 388 Broadway, and then eventually 21 Howard Street. And people would, I was editing on the Steenbeck for years, and I was going all the time because NYU students would come over, and I would charge like $25 a session, and then Honey, who was one of the women in Born in Flames, would walk the really young NYU students home in the middle of the night. somebody came up to me. Honey died like 5 years ago, and somebody came running up to me in LA and said, "Oh my God, I just want to say how grateful I was to Honey. I was like I was like a hick, and I would have been mugged if she hadn't walked me back to NYU." But
yeah. I remember my parents. I told this story on the podcast a couple of times, but I remember growing up, my parents were members of the public theater in the 70s, and they would drive in from Queens in their Volvo, hoping it'd be there when they got back, because they would park around. It was the Bowery.
Well, I had this. I would have these old Lincoln Continentals and Cadillacs that I would buy for like $500, and I would get like a fake permit, like one of a filming permit, and then keep Xeroxing it. In those days, people never checked, and I would keep it parked on the street with filming here, and I would just leave it parked.
Do you have any of those left? Because those could still come in handy.
Yeah, still, exactly. But, you just find ways around rules back then. There were two separate things. As much as everybody hated the World Trade Center back then because they were these two phallic symbols that just ruined the landscape. And there was a beach down there. A lot of stuff we shot down there because I happened to have had known somebody who went to the Western Sahara and got footage of women marching. That's actually a footage that nobody had. Then I had to match it with stuff shot on the beach. But oh my God, what a tragedy and what a horrible thing to actually have the World Trade Center be actually blown up. That was horrific. But you could shoot anything. You could go in and out. Obviously, everything is very kind of rough and kind of found in Born in Flames, and some people have accused the acting of being horrifically amateurish. But hey, nobody was actors. There were a couple of real actors from theater groups down there, but it was a time that was a time where you really felt people were working. There were working artists, there were working dancers, there were working singers, and so you just found an energy there. Basquiat, who wasn't Basquiat, the famous artist yet, was Samo, S-A-M-O.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Sure.
It was great, and so it was actually very strange for some of the women who I brought into that environment because they were from other places. They were from Harlem or Brooklyn or Brownsville, different boroughs that weren't hip at that point. And some of them stayed and some of them didn't, for 5 years. And so I had to people kept changing their hair, and it was an experience, lived an experience. It was an experience that lasted 5 years and became a world. And the editing, the writing happened on the Steenbeck for a long time. But I know for a fact that had I gone to film school, I wouldn't have made that film because people would have said, you can't take that chance. It's not like a documentary where you're going after something. You're going after something that you don't know has an end because you don't even know where it's going to go. You're starting with a hypothesis.
And it's about the discovery, right? Yeah.
It's about discovery, and some of it was based on the concept of the Battle of Algiers, which is that you send a group of people into battle, they get killed, and then there's more. Another wave comes. But you discover those things as you go along because you start with an idea and then you see if the idea flowers. And so, the people who stay. So of the three newspaper editors, Catherine Bigelow and Becky Johnston went on to Hollywood. Hollywood, such as it is. There was more of what people consider Hollywood back then because now it's not like the studio system exactly. I think, people have a misconception of what Hollywood is. Mostly it's people getting foreign distribution money and then finding an American, distributor. It's just the financing is so different than it used to be in the old days.
Well, whatever did happen to that Bigelow girl, she just sort of
disappeared, right?
Disappeared off the map, huh?
She's great. I hike with her maybe once or twice a year. She's wonderful. I think she deserves everything she got. She's just an extraordinary person and plays her cards very close to her chest. She's elegant. I think had she not lived her life in such a very, very careful way to keep information about herself to herself, she would never have won what she did, because she was bold, she was focused, she was very disciplined, and discipline is the strongest word I can use with her. But she didn't let the problems that happen with other films, whereas, with the vampire movie, for example, the company went out of business, so it never got a full release, and that's such a great movie, and other things happened with other films that didn't allow her films to actually reach the pinnacle of success. But Hurt Locker is phenomenal, and she just continues like a soldier.
I was also a fan, I was a fan of Blue Steel when it came out, and kind of had a mainstream feminist sort of message behind it.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, she is very, she knows her stuff. She's very organized, very, very, very organized, very driven. And I think now her goal is to do films that are based on real things. I think ever since she started working with Mark Bowles, she wants to do material based on actual events, fictionalized, or sometimes, but non-fictionalized at others. The way that her last films have been based on true events. I think that's been her goal. But it's hard to set it. It's a shame. There too, I think there is prejudice. If she were a man, I think that it might have been easier to set up more projects. But she's very script oriented. If the script isn't right, she's not going to go.
Yeah, no, I get that sense, exactly what you're saying. She's deliberate, and because you can see she's not like making a movie a year here. She's
exactly. But there are the kinds of people who want to make a movie a year. I was in Cannes with at the same time Spike Lee was. I had known him from before with Working Girls. We were both in the director's fortnight, and I think for me there was a disconnect there on a personal level. I had Working Girls. He was out there selling tube socks as a kind of gimmick, branding himself before branding was the word one used. And I just thought I could never do that, but Spike is the kind of person who would be thrilled to make a movie a year. He loves the process of movie making. And it doesn't matter. He can make a movie like Chirac, and he can then make something like The Blood of Jesus, which I haven't seen.
Yeah. And he's also interesting in that he's so, obviously very dedicated to the cause of equality, African-American filmmakers. Yet I know, from early on, a couple of his heroes were always Scorsese and Woody Allen,
Yeah.
You can see maybe as in terms of being a workaday filmmaker outputting a movie a year or however frequently, that those are two guys from, his childhood that were doing that and have been doing that,
Yeah, and it's the NYU thing, and from Joe's Bedside Barbershop, his first film, is.
Yes.
That's exactly it. Scorsese is his idol. He's teaching it, and Spike is teaching at NYU, and that is his style, and so it's a kind of, I would say there's that, and there's a kind of boys with toys element too. They just love to be in the trenches making movies. And, and sort of going back to your idea of storyteller, I wouldn't consider myself a storyteller. I'm much more of I really am more of an agitprop person. I really would like to more create films which inspire discussion and debate. And I would be happy making festival films where people have strong reactions to films, where they inspire argument, where people are on both sides of an issue, and whether it's women in the sex industry. I think, with Working Girls, I actually did want to make, after having spent 5 years with Born in Flames, I wanted something that could be done in a very contained way. And so I built a set in my loft, which was huge, but I built the middle class brothel inside the loft, and it was the containment was obviously, it was all set in one very long day. But I always call it like the difference between an inductive and a deductive process. Deductive, if you have a script and you deduce the film from the script, and inductive if you start with an idea and then you have to go out from there. But there too, I actually met so many women in the sex industries, and it was at a time where Catherine McKinnon and Andrea Dworkin were like saying that all porn is bad, that all pornography is destructive to women. And part of me was saying, well, no, it's not necessarily, because my issue, and it always will be, is choice.
Right.
It's choice to, to do whatever you want to do. If you want to rent your body, and it's preferable to working 40 hours a day in a Kinko's, that's your choice. But so, at that point, I met so many women who were working as strippers or as prostitutes or as, dominatrixes. And I thought, okay, well, if you can handle it, why not? Why not have that option? So, one of the things I'm actually doing now on the side is putting together a book of stories by strippers, actually autobiographical stories that sometimes are memoir, but they're actually really good stories. But it's kind of on the back burner because I just want to collect as much good material as I can. And that kind of stems from my time back then. And there's a publisher, it's Adam Parfrey, and it's just on a slow thing. But there too, it's kind of having the means in your own hands, and kind of a response to against the woman in the meat grinder kind of imagery. If we control that, then we reject the other. It's because I don't believe that pornography causes violence. It's like saying that all images of women are bad. And then it does then go back to the Laura Mulvey idea of the female gaze. What did you think of Blue is the Warmest Color?
Well, I saw it a few years ago now.
When it came out?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I was at a press screening. It was beautiful. I remember that. And I do remember finding it very, very erotic. A couple of major scenes of when the two characters are having sex. I sort of remember feeling provoked on some level, I guess.
And what did you think of Nymphomaniac? Did you see that?
I did see it. Yes, I did. I wasn't as impressed with that. Feels very different. But these are all very frankly sexual films, right? Is that your...
My point is the depicting of the female body, whether it's different if women do it, but obviously pornography isn't going to go away. It's like abortion isn't going to go away. Pornography isn't going to go away. Prostitution isn't going to go away. So what do you do about them? I think those are really important and long living issues. It's the question is, what do you do? What do you do about them? How do you deal with the question of being female? I think I keep coming back to those issues. Born in Flames didn't deal with any of those issues. I think one of the things about Born in Flames was that I wanted women in Born in Flames who did not care about their appearance. Nobody ever in one single scene makes a comment about appearance at all. They're just who they are. Whereas Working Girls was much more about women who do care about their appearance because they have to present themselves to men because they're renting their bodies. So it's very obviously people have very much 80s hairdos, 80s styles, all of that. But it all comes back to ideas, like the idea of what does it mean to rent your body, and is that a valid choice? That it comes back to an idea as opposed to just telling a story. Because the story idea, if you come down to it or distill it to two sentences, is a woman works in a brothel. She's made to work a double shift. And because the madam is not sensitive to her capacity, she has to quit at the end of the day, which isn't much of a story. So I guess I'm a storyteller, but not really, because I do know some of my friends, especially Becky Johnston, who plays one of the newspaper editors. She wrote Prince of Tides and a couple of,
she adapted from the Pat Conroy book.
Yeah.
Who just died. I bring up his name only because the connection, because Pat Conroy died this week.
Yeah, exactly. But she calls herself a storyteller and is really committed to telling stories. But for some reason, I don't see myself as a storyteller, but more of a propagandist, maybe. I don't know.
Agitator. I understand.
An agitator, yeah.
Yeah. No, well, good for you. But I mean, I still look at what you're doing is still there are stories. You kind of put it in simple terms, but maybe I'm just a little looser with the term. I'm not looking for Dr. Zhivago. I'm just.
Although it would be so great to have made Dr. Zhivago. It's such a great story. It's such a great story. But, it's true, though. In the pilots that I have been trying to pitch, they are more stories. You have to tell a story. You have to go in there and pitch a story. But, I think what happens is that whenever I am pitching a story, I end up losing interest more quickly, whereas the attempt to set up Rialto, it's been 20 years now or more, and I cannot shake it. I really am so committed to it because of the concept behind it. So I think I think you're right. It's being a storyteller, but without a strong concept behind it, without a strong idea, without having an idea to defend. And maybe it's anger that motivates me, an anger that doesn't lessen, because behind it is there's something so big at stake. When there's something so big and so wrong, that something has to change, something has to be defended. And because I'm not the person, we just had a big political discussion, but I'm not the kind of person who could go out and actually rally votes. I don't know how to change someone's mind. I could make a film, and hopefully people could respond to the images and the arguments and the people on screen. But I think if I confronted a pro-life person, I know that I couldn't change their minds, and I probably would just walk away. Mm-hmm. What do you say to somebody who's already in the trenches? It's not anything, or the gun thing, or how do you change people who are entrenched? I don't know, people who are in politics, I have such respect for them, the ones who go door to door and who know all the issues and can patiently try to talk to people, that takes a certain talent, and patience and I think that's what's great about Bernie's troops, that he's gotten young people to actually go out and try to do that,
No, I agree with you. Right.
Yeah, I'd rather wait 20 years to make one movie.
Well, I'm really just very, very glad that I reached out to you, because even though I missed your weekend here in New York last month when you were, and in fact, I just because I'm trying to be a little bit more on top of it. I just was able to have Charlie Ahern on the show, and I just put that show up, actually, the same series that Anthology Film Archives has been doing, which your work was just shown in that. Now Charlie's films are coming up this weekend. So
you also talked to Richard Edson, right?
And I recently talked to Richard. I put up the first, that 20-minute conversation ended up being 3 hours on the phone with Richard.
Isn't he great?
Yes, he really is. I look forward to going out to. I just, whether it's he comes here or I go there, I really do. He's like one of those guys. I mean, I used to see him around New York City downtown also back in the day, but I was too shy to approach him then.
Oh, I see him out here from time to time because Henry Jaglom has a Christmas party.
Oh, okay.
In the old days, Henry Jaglom's Christmas parties used to have Shelley Winters and all of these sort of old-time glamorous sort of B-level actresses, right? They've been Karen Black, they've died off kind of sadly. I mean, but in the last couple of years, Richard has been there, and Richard is just somebody who you just look at, and I knew him from New York, and it's just always great to see Richard. I mean, Richard should be working more than he is, because he's got one of the great faces.
He does have one of the great faces and personalities, but he's so quirky, and he's interested in different types of storytelling nowadays than what most mainstream films are doing, even independent films are doing, that he feels a little bit kind of out of step, but he's very talented and great on screen. Yeah, I actually sent an email out to Jaglom's office, I guess, and I never heard back.
I can contact them and let them know. Look, well, yeah, you should talk to Henry. Henry's fascinating. He's I mean, his protege Tana is in everything.
I know.
Tana Frederick.
Yeah. No, I've seen it, and in fact, it was Chuck Workman who, said that he put me in touch with them, and he said if you mention maybe bringing Tana on, that could help increase the chances. So I understood.
If you mention Tana, he will do it in 2 seconds. I mean, because he's always putting Tana, and just say you want to talk to both of them. But Tana is very modest. She's not like gonna hop in front of the camera and steal all the thunder, but he just is pushing Tana in such a huge way. But yes, mention Tana, and I'll write to them and just say that you've been amazing. But yeah, I mean, Henry can just be all over the place. But I doubt that you'll ever be here on a New Year's Eve, but you should actually go to one of his parties. They're actually very kind of old school, glamorous, fun. I mean, just champagne, and he's wealthy from inherited wealth.
Oh, okay.
Like his father was an industrialist, but he's great. And Tana is actually, Tana is a wonderful, very warm person and very welcoming. And these days, I mean, you just never know. I mean, sometimes Peter Bogdanovich is there, sometimes, FX Sweeney, the critic, and I mean, but it used to be truly a lot of sequins, but the sequins were a different house, a different match, and much bigger. And all
the sons of Orson, right, will show up.
Yes, absolutely. But that's great to talk to. It's great you talk to Richard, because Richard, I think Mark Boone Jr. It's interesting because he had this big role in Sons of Anarchy, and he had a tiny bit in Born in Flames, just like one scene.
I didn't remember. Do I remember? Oh, I must have been so young I didn't recognize him, because I recognized Eric Bogosian, and I kind of know a little bit Valerie Smolodone, but I didn't know that Mark Boone was in that.
Yeah, he plays the guy on the subway who's harassing the woman. He was skinny then. It's because he was so skinny then. That's why. That's
what it is. I love that. So you didn't have Rocket's Red Glare in it, but you had Mark Boone.
Exactly.
I wanted to. Mark Boone is again another one. I have obviously you can tell I have a bit of a fondness for character actors. From this era. So I definitely is another guy that and I've had on like Tom DiCillo on the show, and Alexander Rockwell, and John Turturro just did the show. I'm trying to get closer and closer to people like Mark Boone, and have him come on just to tell stories. Oh, I just had on Tom Noonan on.
Oh, yeah, Tom Noonan. I know him. I know Tom.
Holy crap. And I had to leave because I had to go get my kid. I mean, I was there for an hour or so in his apartment recording it. You could hear it. It's up, and I couldn't believe I had to leave, and he was still willing to talk, and so he said that we could pick it up again later this month. So I'm hopefully planning on a second trip over to there. He was shooting the Louis C.K. web series.
Oh my God, yeah, I went to his wedding when he was married to Karen.
Oh, okay.
Years ago, we used to be really close, and you know what? I edited Alexander Rockwell's movie. I'm trying to remember the name of it. One of his early movies. Which one? It was the one with the kid on crutches. With the kid on crutches, and I kept trying to get him to. I edited various people's movies. Michael Oblowitz's movie, Alexander Rockwell's movie. When he's always with the same, like it was the woman he was with before Jennifer Beals, and I'm trying to remember her name, but I'm always trying to get people to shorten their movies. It was like, no, make it shorter.
Right.
What's he doing now, Alexander?
Oh, he just did a very highly personal project about a year ago, maybe a little bit more than that. And he cast his 2 kids in this film, and they're really just a couple of other kids in the movie. It's just kind of follows them, and it's shot in black and white, very very low budget, and it got distribution by a small distributor who actually is a friend of mine. So Alexander has been on this podcast twice actually, because I had him on, and then he came on when this new film of his called Little Feet got a theatrical. It actually ended up getting a small theatrical, but it played at like the IFC Center, formerly known as the Waverly, here in New York. In fact, because there's kids in it. On the second day, on a Saturday afternoon, I did the Q&A with him, and I brought my kid and a friend of his, and Todd Solondz was there, so that was fun. Yeah. he's also done this podcast. I mean, everybody's coming on eventually. You know, it's yeah. These are all my heroes. You know, I love all these people that are just doing their own thing, and so I'm sort of very charmed by that, and I hope the audiences out there are too. But.
Well, that's great. That's absolutely great. Anyway, I would like, if I do anything new, I would love to talk to you about it first, but I'll talk to Henry. I'll drop him a line.
Okay. I mean, I am planning to come out. It's even possible I might be out there in June, but it sounds like a fun way to pass a New Year's Eve for sure, if you don't mind me being a date or something.
No, that would be great. Well, let's definitely get together, and actually, if you want to see Henry, then that would be a great time to actually talk to Henry.
Right.
It'd be great if you could go to his house. I mean, he's got this great house.
Sure. I know I need to, my whole plan was to try to get out there and just line up a bunch, as many as I could of, there's a little bit more of an older guard of, obviously filmmakers because of the nature of independent film seems to really be their concentration on this coast,
But I'm so glad you're coming here, coming to L.A. So, yeah, but it's such a pleasure to meet you.
Same here. I'm really thrilled. I've definitely been. I thought about you for over the years since I've been doing this, and who knew that I would actually. For me, it's a thrill. So who knew that it would happen? It's really
cool.
It's gratifying.
Well, it's wonderful, and so let's meet when you come.
Okay.
And I'll contact Henry Jaglam and just say that you're really cool, and because and. He should set something up with you for sure. I mean, it'd be so great if you could do it from his house. That would be great.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll leave it there. That sounds good.
All right.
So goodbye, and until the next time.
Until the next time.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Have a great week.
You too, Adam. Take care.
Molly. Molly, are you in there?
Gina, would you give me a break?
You could try pills.
I'm not going to screw up my hormones for 2 shifts a week.
Bye, Robert. Thanks so much for coming by.
Sure, Lizzie.
Oh, and thanks for being so patient.
Man, I wish she'd admit she's a pimp. If you made her take a fucking lie detector test, she'd probably pass it saying, wow, this is a nice place where nice people meet each other.
Hey, did you hear about the blind hooker? You had to hand it to her. Here's the best yet.
No more hooker jokes, please.
How's your office?
Things are humming. We have a new secretary.
Okay, really?
Celebrating a whole hour this time.
Oh, wonderful.
I can tell you right now that we'll be back next week. As we enter the holidays, things are winding down. Amos Poe, well, of course, the holidays are next Saturday and Sunday, so I probably will post on Friday the 23rd. My conversation with Amos Poe, he's another one from the 80s and worked with a lot of seminal. I emailed Susan Seidelman. I'm just waiting to hear back because I need to have Susan Seidelman on the show. If you know her, please reach out and help me out. There's a number of people. I need help booking my show. As many great guests as I get, you can double, triple that number, of course. For the people who I try to get and either don't respond for one reason or another, not out of any negative reason, it might just be they're busy, or just don't know my podcast and probably get lots of requests for things and it just gets lost. How do you stand out? I have to write better subject lines, I think, in my emails. Liv Ullman has been on this podcast, Susan Seidelman. Barbara Koppel has been on this podcast. Lizzie Borden has been on this podcast. Why aren't you on it? That could be a subject line. Okay, guys, if you've been entertained by this podcast, by now you should have already gone to our iTunes page and, for God's sake, posted a nice comment and a star rating. So you heard me chanting earlier right before we went into the segment. And I don't know what's going on here. Anyhow, so please do that. I think you need an iTunes account. That's all. Most of you have it. If you own a Mac, even if you own a PC, you can get iTunes if that's your platform for playing MP3 files. Anyway, so you can go to the store and search Filmwax and leave us that feedback. It's important because if I can get hundreds of you rather than just a few dozen, that's all that's up there. It frankly astounds me that I even have to say that. I mean, there are podcasters with smaller audiences who don't have such a relationship with their audiences who have scores more. I don't know how they do it. I'm not sure what I'm lacking. I've got to look into it and figure it out. But you can also go to facebook.com/Filmwax Radio, and you can like our Facebook page, and you can write comments about the shows. You can post photos. I mean, maybe you can't do that, but you can write comments about the shows, and I will. I think I have to prove some of this stuff. I'm not sure. And then you can go to Twitter. It's at Filmwax Radio, on Instagram at Filmwax Radio, and you can engage with us. You can send me an email. Just go to filmwaxradio.com, and there's an email button. There's a newsletter subscription field there. You can enter your email and get our newsletter, which I don't mail out. But I'm going to start. I'm actually going to go on the blog, and I'm going to go email. That's what I'm going to do in the next couple of weeks. I'm going to do a little bit of that and send everybody an email blast with a year-end thank you and all that. I'm going to do that. But you can go to the website, and there's not a lot of... I put up the most recent shows there. It's more of a way of promoting the podcast than anything else. At some point or other, I'll make the entire, or just about the entire archive of shows available. I don't think I have the balls to put a paywall on that, because I don't fool myself into believing that anybody will spend money on too much of this stuff. If I did, believe me, I would do it for certain episodes. Because, I'm a podcaster. So I say this in anticipation. One of the other people I ran into is a friend of mine who works at Kickstarter. When I say I ran into him last night at the Magnolia Party, and he's very anxious for me to do my Kickstarter. So I'm going to do that because I have Kickstarter people who are willing to kind of get behind me and help support and promote a Kickstarter campaign, which is to raise money for new equipment and infrastructural needs of the podcast. And then after that, I'm going to go and do a Patreon ongoing way of trying to raise a little bit of money for the show, because I do devote so much time to it. And everything has a value, folks, correct? And so actually all I'm asking you to do now is just to engage through social media. I'm not even asking you for any financial support. I'm asking you for your social media support. So, and start with the iTunes store. Then you can go to the platforms like Facebook and Twitter, Instagram, and follow and like and all of that. So that too helps. It does help. And it makes me feel like I'm doing something meaningful too, because I hear back. And I do hear back from folks. I don't want to sound like I don't. I do. And it feels really good. So thank you for everything. As we wind down 2016, I promise you another year of wonderful episodes, wonderful guests, and I hope some contribution to the relief from the world, from Syria and from Iraq and from Afghanistan and from parts of Africa and parts of Europe and the Brexit, and most of all from what the hell is going on right here in this country right now, because it is bad. So I am trying to contribute a small little bit and do my bit. So if you're even listening now at this late in the game, thank you. I'm going to have to sign off here, right? My name's Adam Shartoff. The name of the show is Filmwax Radio. It is part of the ShowBriz Studios podcast network. And it's presented by Rooftop Films. Thank you. Take care of yourself, please, and the ones you love.